The wine glasses still shimmered with condensation, untouched, when she dropped to one knee and held out a plastic ring like a bad high school skit. Her dress was just a little too tight, her laugh a little too loud, and her eyes, those damn eyes, sparkled, but not for me. They were fixed on Kyle, the new hire from her department, the guy who thought a loosened tie made him charismatic. "Will you take over for this old man?" she said, loud enough to turn every head. Every head except mine. The air died. Forks paused mid-bite. One of her friends choked on a giggle that immediately sounded guilty. Someone whispered, "Jesus Christ," under their breath. And Kyle, poor bastard, looked like he wanted to crawl under the birthday cake. But she didn't flinch. She kept smiling like it was all hilarious, like she was the queen of some sitcom no one else had agreed to be part of. "Come on, lighten up. It's a joke," she chirped, but her eyes flicked to me, just once, to check. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I didn't shout, didn't throw a drink, didn't do the whole hurt husband storms off routine. I simply stood, folded my napkin with deliberate slowness, and placed it beside my untouched steak. Then I raised my glass, not to her, not to him, not to anyone, and walked out through the side door. Not a word. The silence that followed me was louder than any argument. Outside, the cold hit me like a slap. The street lamps buzzed faintly overhead, and the pavement still shimmered from an earlier rain. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the city air like it might clean something out of me. I didn't light a cigarette. I don't smoke. I didn't cry. I don't do that in public. I just stood there, the words "take over for this old man," replaying in my head like a scratched record. She said it with that smile. That cruel, rehearsed smile she uses when she's playing to a crowd. She came out after me about 5 minutes later, shoes clicking fast, voice too chipper. "Oh my God, babe, seriously? You're being so dramatic. It was just a gag. You know I love you, right?" She tried to slip her arm around mine. I let it drop. "Go finish your skit," I said flat. No anger. No bite. Just that detached calm that always scared her more than shouting ever did. "Oh, come on," she laughed, too loudly again. "You're embarrassing yourself now." That was the last thing she said before turning back toward the restaurant, mumbling something about getting her purse. She didn't come back out. But her father did. He stepped out into the alley behind me, shoulders stiff, jaw clenched. The man who once told me, back when I asked for his blessing, that marriage is about protecting the people you love, not testing them. I hadn't looked him in the eye all night. Not since she climbed on one knee in front of everyone. Not since he watched her humiliate me. He didn't speak, just stood beside me, hands in his pockets, watching the taillights pass. "You saw it," I finally said. My voice felt heavier than I expected. He nodded once, slow. "I did. You still think she's just impulsive?" Another pause. Then, I didn't laugh. That was the moment I knew. He'd crossed a line in his mind too, even if he didn't say it out loud. The silence between us wasn't solidarity, not exactly, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was the uneasy stillness of two men who had both seen something they couldn't unsee. I didn't go back inside. I took a walk around the block, ended up at a diner we used to frequent before the marriage started fraying at the edges. Ordered coffee I didn't drink and stared at the checkered linoleum floor like it might offer answers. My phone buzzed once, then twice. Then it stopped. Probably her. Probably trying to spin it. Probably thinking I'd get over it, because it was just a joke. But there was no coming back from that kind of joke. Not when it was said in front of my colleagues, her coworkers, my friends. Not when it landed like a dagger and she still tried to sell it as slapstick. And not when her father had looked at me the way he did. I went home alone, left the balloons and candles behind. The front porch light was still on, as if the house didn't know anything had changed. But I did. And as I hung up my coat, I passed the office door. It had been years since I opened the bottom drawer. Years since I touched those files. But tonight, the joke ended. And the paperwork began. The office still smelled faintly of printer toner and old cedar. A relic of when I worked from home full-time, back before things got busy for her. These days, she only came in here to dump bills or shove tax folders on the desk with a clipped, "Can you handle this?" The desk lamp flickered once when I turned it on, casting a weak amber pool over the drawers I hadn't opened in years. I sat. My chair creaked like it disapproved. Maybe it did. I reached down and pulled at the bottom right drawer, tight from lack of use. It stuck for a second, then slid open with a shudder like it was waking up. Inside, dust, a faded manila folder with my uncle's name handwritten in blocky, military script, and one thick navy blue legal binder. I didn't need to check the label to know what it was. The post-nuptial agreement. Her idea, of course. back when she still talked about self-sufficiency and modern marriages. We were sitting at that overpriced brunch spot she loved. Everything avocado and exposed brick. When she first floated the idea, mimosa in hand, eyes darting over the menu like it was no big deal. I just think it's responsible, she said. Like prenups, but for grown-ups. Besides, I'd never use it. I nodded back then, like always. And when the papers came, she skimmed them once, signed without reading. I know, because she left a smudge of lipstick on the corner of the page when she passed it back to me. Eyes already drifting to her phone. Call might have been texting her even then, for all I know. But I read it. Back then, and now. I pulled the binder out and flipped through the pages. The soft SHFF of thick legal parchment was oddly soothing. Most of it was standard boilerplate, the kind of clauses that get tossed in by board attorneys. But I'd insisted on a few specific additions. One in particular, buried on page 12, subsection 17, paragraph B. My finger hovered over it now. In the event that either party engages in conduct deemed publicly humiliating or reputationally harmful to the other during a family gathering or personal milestone event, jointly held assets may be reassessed and reclassified as individually assignable under existing trust protections and subject to accelerated reassignment. I hadn't thought about it in years. It was just a precaution at the time, a hypothetical escape hatch. She had even joked when we signed, "You think I'm going to roast you at your own retirement party?" I didn't laugh then either. I closed the binder gently, like it was loaded. Across the room sat a dusty safe tucked behind the bookshelf. I hadn't needed it since I stopped running the business. But the key still hung on a nail behind the cabinet. I opened it and placed the binder inside, along with the deed folder from my uncle's estate. That was another thing she conveniently forgot. When we bought the house, it was my inheritance that covered the first 50%. She liked to say we bought it. But the cashier's check came from a trust fund under my name, not hers. At the time, it didn't matter. At the time, I loved her. Funny how people only remember the parts of history that benefit them. Before I closed the safe, I grabbed the old folder that held our refinance documents. Signed 6 years ago. Her signature clear as day, agreeing to remove her name to lock in a better rate. She didn't care. She was busy planning a vacation. Sign whatever he needs, she told her father when he asked if she'd reviewed the papers. I trust him. I bet she did. I bet she still thinks trust means I'll roll over when humiliated in front of 50 people while she mock proposes to some junior analyst with a jawline and no spine. I sat back down, opened my laptop, and typed a short email to my lawyer. Subject line, Clause 17B, activation. Nothing more. He would understand. Outside the window, our backyard lights flickered on automatically. Motion detected. Maybe a squirrel. Maybe the wind. Or maybe just the house reacting to a new shift in ownership no one else had noticed yet. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Not angry. Not even sad. Just alert. She thought she humiliated me in front of a crowd. What she actually did was hand me the keys to my own exit plan, gift-wrapped in front of witnesses. All I had to do now was turn the lock. Clause 17B wasn't something you find in standard legal templates. It wasn't something most attorneys would bother to draft. It was the kind of clause that got side-eyed and underlined, followed by a phone call asking, "Are you sure you want this in there?" My lawyer, a man named Burrow with a perpetual coffee stain on his cuff and a talent for weaponizing footnotes, had called me the day we finalized the post-nup. "You really want to keep this clause about public humiliation?" he'd asked, tapping the page. "It's not standard. That's the point," I told him. He gave me a long look, part lawyer, part therapist, and said, "Then I'd advise you keep all records and timestamps if it ever comes into play." I had. Years ago, I made a file on a dusty old hard drive named if_needed. I stored recordings, statements, receipts, anything that could offer context, verification, or ammunition if this hypothetical clause ever stopped being hypothetical. It had become more of an artifact than a plan. I wasn't waiting for this moment. I wasn't circling dates on calendars or fantasizing about revenge. I just knew people. I'd lived long enough to know that some promises start to rot the moment they're made. And now, sitting in my office with the dull blue screen casting shadows across the room, I clicked open the folder. The video clip from the birthday party had already been sent to me by a mutual friend, someone who had enough decency to record the moment not for gossip, but for clarity. It was short, blurry, but it caught the moment perfectly. Her on one knee, plastic ring extended, turning the entire room into a theater of humiliation. The laughter, the silence, my face. I saved the file under a new directory labeled clause 17_event. Next, I opened the secure email portal and uploaded the relevant documents. The postnup, the trust deed, the refinance paperwork, and a signed confirmation of her acknowledgement of the clause, with her initials in the margin, done during brunch, right before she ordered the bottomless mimosas. Irony doesn't get more bitter than that. I wrote one line in the email to Burrow. Clause 17 is now in play. Let's move. I hit send. Then I sat back and stared at the screen. There was no elation, no thrill. This wasn't a movie scene where the wronged man grins at the first strike of justice. This was a spreadsheet moment, a filing cabinet moment, a tactical maneuver in a long war that neither of us had openly acknowledged, but both had been fighting in small, petty ways for years. What she didn't understand, what she never understood, was that I don't yell. I don't post rants online. I don't throw plates or make scenes. That kind of drama always seemed cheap to me. Temporary. A sugar rush of anger that leaves nothing but a headache. What I do instead is plan. In that moment, I realized she probably didn't even remember the clause. She probably didn't remember signing the damn postnup. She barely reads anything longer than a caption these days. Her entire memory of that time was likely reduced to a hashtag brunch photo and a cute pin she stole from the law office. She wore that moment like an accessory. I wore it like armor. The legal language was specific. In the event of public humiliation or reputational harm inflicted during a family event, that party was both family and public. And I had a room full of witnesses, a video file, and the date stamped on the invitation email that she herself had sent from our joint account. Even the location, our home, worked in my favor. The house wasn't just the backdrop. It was the battlefield. And she brought her little foot soldier into it with a smirk and a ring from a vending machine. Burrow replied within the hour. Got it. Confirming the clause is enforceable as written. We'll start drafting the reassignment documents under the trust acceleration clause. I'll have something to you by morning. One question, are we notifying her or letting it arrive by mail? I stared at that last sentence for a while. Notifying her or letting it arrive by mail? That was the question that divided men from boys, rage from strategy, theater from consequence. I replied, mail. Let the envelope speak. And then I closed the laptop. Just like that. The trigger had been pulled. Quietly, cleanly, legally. And she wouldn't hear the gunshot until the bullet reached the target. The first time I met her father, he looked at me like he was sizing up a contractor, measuring whether my spine was straight, whether my handshake said steady or slippery. Back then, I thought it was protective instinct. Later, I realized it was ownership instinct. The kind of man who thought a daughter was something you temporarily leased to another man until she broke or disappointed you, at which point you either repossess or blame the husband. Still, I played the game, smiled through cigars on his back porch, laughed when he told outdated jokes about marriage being a man's longest prison sentence. I let him talk over me when we discussed the house, because I knew something he didn't. Power isn't loud. It's tucked in clauses and margins and signatures you don't bother reading because you assume someone else already did. He helped us with the down payment, part of it. At the time, he called it an investment in my little girl's future, but insisted on being listed on the original purchase agreement. Not ownership, not even equity, just visibility. He wanted to feel involved. And she, of course, praised him like he was a benevolent king. It's sweet, she told me later. He just wants to feel useful. Useful. That word again. When interest rates dropped a year later, I suggested refinancing. She barely looked up from her tablet. Whatever you need me to sign, just put it in front of me. So I did. The bank, the notary, all of it happened in a quiet blur. What she didn't realize, what neither of them bothered to understand, was that in restructuring the mortgage under my name, her father's so-called investment was silently converted into a gift. The paper trail terminated at me. His name disappeared from the documents. The legal reality, he'd handed me money with no strings attached, and I'd thanked him with a bottle of scotch and a smile. Neither of them ever asked. And I never corrected the illusion. Why would I? Let them believe what they wanted to believe. Let him puff his chest and talk about the house I helped you to get. Let her use it as leverage during arguments. Well, it's not just your house, my dad helped. I'd just nod and go back to washing the dishes. There's a specific kind of power in letting someone think they've won a negotiation you never showed up to. It wasn't malice. Not then. Just patience. But now that patience had matured into cold leverage. The night after the party, while she was still pretending nothing had happened and texting her friends gifs about drama queen husbands, I was on a call with Burrow confirming what I already knew. The down payment had no binding claim. Her father never filed a lien, never requested equity stake, never even asked for a promissory note. It was all handshakes and pride. Burrow's voice came through the line calm, almost bored. You want me to include a release clause acknowledging the original contribution as a non-recourse gift? Absolutely, I said, and highlight that in the correspondence. Got it. He hung up, and I stared at the reflection of myself in the office window. Not angry, not smug, just clear. The way you feel when the fog lifts and you see every piece on the board for what it is. Her father thought he was a kingmaker. But kings don't check fine print. Kings don't notice when the throne they think they built is quietly moved from under them. I remembered a cookout, maybe 5 years ago. He'd been drinking, and halfway through a story about his time in the Navy, he leaned in and said, "You know, if things ever go south between you two, just remember who really helped make this house happen." I nodded, smiled, and handed him another beer. Tonight, I remembered that moment not with bitterness, but with surgical clarity. He thought he held a card. He didn't even realize the deck had been swapped. And when the letters went out, one to her, one to him, it would hit them both like a gust of wind in an open elevator shaft. Not loud, not violent, just sudden and irreversible. The game wasn't over, but the board had shifted, and they were just now noticing that half their pieces were already gone. Filing day was uneventful by design. I woke up early, not because I was anxious, but because habit demanded it. Made coffee, black, no sugar. Ate the same protein bar I always did on heavy decision days. The kind of day that doesn't announce itself as war, but moves like a quiet predator. Everything was already in place. Burrow had confirmed the documents were queued, the trust mechanics ready to move the second we initiated. The trust, inherited from my uncle, was structured like a legal minefield with one major benefit: an embedded acceleration clause. Burrow had crafted it years ago, built to trigger if any asset within the trust structure was deemed subject to hostile or reputational compromise. It sounded dramatic, because it was. My uncle had been a paranoid bastard, God rest him. But his paranoia was my shield now. Because when she staged that joke in our backyard, in front of our families, co-workers, and half the neighborhood, that clause lit up like a Christmas tree. At 9 a.m. sharp, the motion was filed with the county. It wasn't even a dramatic moment. Just a confirmation ping on my phone. Ownership transfer initiated per clauses 17b and Trust Article 4. Confirmation pending reassessment. I sipped my coffee and opened the sliding door to the backyard. The same backyard where she'd knelt in front of her coworker like it was Saturday Night Live. The balloons were still there, half deflated. The catering tent had been broken down, but the footprints on the lawn hadn't faded yet. A wine cork sat in the grass like some abandoned bullet casing. I let the door close behind me and watched a squirrel wrestle with a bird feeder. At 11:47 a.m., the first email went out, county assessor's office to her inbox. A friendly, polite notice about a reassessment request tied to a potential ownership shift. Civil language. Bureaucratic tone. But it might as well have been a cannon blast. No reply. Not to me, anyway. But at 12:34 p.m., I got a second notification. This one BCC'd from Burrow's office. Email sent to one recipient. Her father. Subject line: Notice of Equity Reassignment. No greeting. No fluff. Just an attached PDF with the formal declaration. One sentence was highlighted in neon yellow. All equity claims void under Clause 17b. Property reassigned under individual provision, pursuant to pre-established trust enforcement. That sentence had taken years to sit there, dormant like a buried weapon. Now it was live. I imagined her father reading it over his midday espresso, maybe on his phone, maybe printed out by some assistant he still treated like it was 1994. And I imagined the moment he'd reread that line, over and over, until it finally clicked. I turned the house into a one-man asset overnight. The silence afterward was confirmation. No calls, no emails, just a void where panic was trying to decide which direction to run. At 1:03 p.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in my office, watching the email threads multiply. Notifications from the trust administrator. A notification from the digital title company. Each line dull, corporate, emotionless, perfectly detached. Like machinery rolling through a forest of illusions they'd thought were real. She still hadn't texted. No jokes now. No, you're being ridiculous. No flirty emojis. Because by now, even she understood. This wasn't some fight over a couch or who got the blender. This was about ground, about foundation. The place where she'd thrown parties and taken selfies and told people our home. But it wasn't hers anymore. It never really had been. The funniest part? I wasn't even angry. Not anymore. Anger requires heat. This was ice. She had made a public spectacle. I had made a private decision. She'd embarrassed me with an audience. I responded with a signature. One that carried weight. One that came with implications. One that no speech or apology could unwind. And the best part? She hadn't even begun to feel it yet. The first call came at 1:41 p.m. I was at the dry cleaners, standing in line behind a man arguing over starch preferences, when her name lit up my screen. I let it ring out. 10 seconds later, another call. Then another. Then a voicemail. By the time I stepped out into the parking lot, the message had already transcribed halfway on my screen. What is this about the house? Why is the county emailing me? She sounded annoyed. Not scared, yet. Annoyed, like I'd changed the Wi-Fi password without telling her. Like it was an inconvenience she expected me to explain away with a sheepish apology. I didn't listen to the rest. Didn't need to. She was still coasting on assumption. Still living in the illusion that consequences were things that happened to other people. To be fair, they usually were. She was attractive, articulate, strategically vulnerable when necessary. The kind of woman who had spent her life expertly dodging accountability with a combination of performance and charm. But charm doesn't rewrite contracts. At 3:07 p.m., she texted, "Hey, can you just tell me what's going on? This reassessment notice is weird. Did something happen with the mortgage?" At 4:18 p.m., she called again. No voicemail this time. And then, silence. The kind that starts to thicken, like fog creeping in over a cliffside. When I pulled into the driveway just after 6, the lights in the front hallway were already on. I paused for a second in the car. She'd beaten me home. That meant the performance was coming. The wounded eyes. The soft voice. Maybe even a little self-deprecating humor about bad timing, and oh God, I had no idea. I opened the front door. She was waiting in the kitchen, still in her work clothes. Heels off, glass of white wine half full on the counter, untouched. She didn't say anything right away. Just watched me set down my keys and pull off my jacket. "So," she said, finally, "I got some weird stuff today." I didn't answer. Just walked into my office, opened the filing cabinet, and retrieved a single sheet from the blue binder. I took my time. Let the silence stretch. Let her wonder what page I was turning to. What paper I was about to put in her hands. When I came back, I didn't sit. I didn't explain. I just held the paper out like it was a receipt for something she'd forgotten she ordered. She took it, eyebrows knitting. Scanned it once. I watched her mouth move as she read the clause number aloud. Clause 17B. The second time through, her lips didn't move. She went pale, not dramatically, not in a way that would show up in a movie, but a slow draining, like color bleeding out from the corners of her face. "This is old," she said finally. "This is from when we first. Wait, we signed this? Together?" I didn't answer. She kept reading. "In the event of public humiliation or reputational harm." Her eyes jumped ahead, scanning for loopholes, for asterisks, for ways out. But legal text has no mercy. No emojis. No tone to soften the impact. Just cold geometry, clause after clause, designed to survive gaslighting. She looked up at me. The wine glass behind her reflected the overhead light like a spotlight in a police drama. "I didn't mean anything by that joke," she said, voice suddenly too loud for the room. "It wasn't serious. You're overreacting. You always overreact when people tease you. Still nothing from me. But you can't just take the house. That's not how it works. We're married. We bought it together." I held up one hand. Slowly, then tapped the signature line on the page she still held. Her name, in her own handwriting. Her breathing changed. Shallower now. Not rage. Not tears. Just an accelerating hum of panic that hadn't found a direction yet. She set the page down. Sat on the edge of the kitchen stool like her legs had decided they couldn't be trusted anymore. "You knew," she said quietly. "You remembered this. From all those years ago." I nodded once. Just once. She stared at the paper. "Why didn't you say anything?" "You didn't ask," I said. It was the first thing I'd said since entering the house. Her mouth opened, then closed. The gears were still turning, but they weren't connecting. She was realizing, slowly, achingly, that she'd tripped a wire she didn't even remember was there. That the little improv comedy act she staged at my expense wasn't just tacky, it was legally actionable. She looked at the wine, then back at me. And then, for the first time in our entire marriage, she was quiet. Not silent because she was planning her next line. Not quiet because she was offended. Quiet because, for once, She genuinely didn't know what to say. I turned and walked upstairs. She didn't follow. He insisted we meet at his place. Of course he did. Control was his oxygen, and in his mind, location was leverage. He wanted home field advantage, his polished hardwood floors, his grand oil paintings of men who thought loyalty was measured in obedience. The kind of house where the thermostat is set to 68 year-round and you're expected to freeze or sweat in silence. I showed up at 5 p.m. sharp. No blazer, no tie, just a man carrying a slim black folder containing the kind of documents that didn't need theatrics. His daughter had texted me 4 times that morning asking me to just talk to him, to help him understand. I didn't reply. I figured the documents would do the explaining. He opened the door wearing that strained smile older men use when they think they still hold the high ground. No handshake, just a quick, "Come in," like I was there to apologize. The moment we stepped into his study, the performance started. "You screwed her over," he barked, barely letting me sit. "I don't care what your lawyer says." You knew she didn't understand what she was signing. I laid the folder on the coffee table and opened it calmly. The first page, his own contribution agreement to the house. Dated, scanned, countersigned, without any lien, clause, or attached condition. The second page, the refinance document from 6 years ago. His daughter's signature, acknowledging the mortgage consolidation in my name only. The third page, a notarized copy of the postnup. Her signature again, her initials beside clause 17b, her lipstick stain faint but present. He leaned forward, reading in fast gulps. I waited. "She didn't read this," he muttered, like that excused it. "That's not my responsibility," I said evenly. He stood, paced, rubbed his temples like he was auditioning for a migraine commercial. "You manipulated her. You knew she wouldn't understand this legalese." I didn't flinch. "She signed it twice. You were there when she told you I could handle the refinance. Remember?" He paused. I watched it hit him. How many of his own memories contradicted his outrage? How many times he'd told her to just sign and trust the man? He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're hiding behind a technicality." "No," I said. "I'm standing on a foundation you helped pour. You just didn't bother to read the blueprint." His voice cracked when he shouted. "You think this makes you some kind of man? Stripping your wife's security away over a joke?" I didn't bother responding. Instead, I reached into the folder again and slid out the video. Paused on the frame where she was on one knee, holding the ring up to Kyle like she was auditioning for a comedy special. His face was visible in the background. Pale, unamused. He stared at it. "Don't you dare weaponize that moment," he said, his voice suddenly small. "It's already a weapon." She pulled the pin, I said. He pulled out his phone and dialed. I already knew who he was calling. His family lawyer, some Ivy League fossil who probably used cufflinks and the word gentleman unironically. He put the call on speaker. "Roger," he said. "We've got a situation. My daughter's husband is trying to void her share of the house using some clause buried in a postnup." A pause. Then the lawyer's tired voice, tinny through the speaker. "Is this about the trust activation filing I saw this morning?" "Yes," he snapped. "He's reassigning the deed. Says she signed away her rights." "Did she?" the lawyer asked. No emotion. Just years of legal fatigue distilled into 2 syllables. "She didn't know she was." "That's not the question," the lawyer said. "She embarrassed him," he added quickly. "At his birthday party. Made some kind of dumb joke. Now he's trying to take everything from her." There was a long pause. Then, "Was the incident public?" "Yes," he said, spitting the word. "Full backyard of guests. She fake proposed to some co-worker like a goddamn lunatic." Another pause. And then, the lawyer sighed. It was quiet, but it landed like a stone. "Then I'm afraid he owns the house." Silence. Her father looked like someone had cut the strings from inside him. He sat down slowly, like the weight of that sentence broke something in his knees. He can't just do that," he said, voice cracking. "He already did," the lawyer replied. "I'll call the board. I'll talk to zoning. I'll block the reassessment." "Jim," the lawyer interrupted, "this is airtight. You gave him a gift. She signed her rights away. He has documentation, signatures, even video evidence for clause invocation. If we go to court, he wins. Publicly." The call ended with a dry click. We sat there. No one moved. The room felt smaller now. The paintings looked older. He stared at the folder, then at me, then somewhere behind me, at nothing. "I gave her that money to protect her," he whispered. "No," I said, standing. "You gave it to me, and I protected it." I left the folder open on the table. Let him keep it. Let him sit with the ghosts of paperwork and pride. Outside, the sky was clear. Cold, but clean. Inside, The collapse had already begun. She knocked softly, like the house might reject her before I did. It was just past 10 p.m. when I opened the door, and there she stood on the front step, not in one of her curated outfits or with that rehearsed expression she wore to family dinners, just sweatpants, a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and bare feet in designer flip-flops that suddenly looked out of place. Her face was scrubbed raw. No foundation, no mascara, no polished armor. Just the woman underneath. The one who, until recently, believed the world bent for her if she smiled wide enough. "I thought you loved me," she whispered, like it was a password to a door she'd already locked from the other side. I held her gaze. I did. That truth landed between us like a dropped plate, already broken before it hit the floor. She waited. She was good at that, letting silence work in her favor, making it seem like she was the fragile one, the victim of some misunderstanding that should be swept away with a warm embrace and a clean slate. But this time, the silence didn't fold in her direction. She started, voice brittle. I wasn't thinking. I didn't think it would. God, it was a joke. Kyle knew it. Everyone knew it. No, I said. Everyone watched it. She flinched at that. Because she knew it was true. She hadn't just made a scene. She'd constructed one. Framed it. Delivered the line. Hit her mark. The problem wasn't what she said. It was that it was intentional. She looked over my shoulder like she might walk past me. Like there was still some version of this where she got to come inside, sit on the edge of the bed, and cry while I rubbed her back and said the things she expected. Instead, I stepped forward and let the screen door fall closed behind me. She blinked, surprised. "Can we talk?" she asked, but it wasn't really a question. It was a reflex. I shook my head once. My lawyer advised against it. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Are you serious?" "I'm precise," I said. "You've known that since the day I explained amortization tables to you on our second date. You laughed back then, remember?" She did. But she wasn't laughing now. "You're blowing this so out of proportion. And you thought kneeling in front of another man at my birthday party was a harmless prank." "He's gay," she blurted, desperate now. "Kyle's gay, for God's sake. So the knife you used was made of rubber?" I said. "Do you think that makes it less humiliating?" She didn't answer, but her shoulders slumped. Her arms wrapped around herself like the cold was finally registering. "You're punishing me," she said. "This is just punishment." "No," I said. "This is structure. This is the architecture you helped build, and now you're shocked the foundation doesn't shift just because you're sorry." She looked past me again, eyes darting for an exit that didn't exist. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's a question for your father. Or Kyle. Or whoever else wants to get on one knee." She bit her lip. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears came. She wasn't crying. Not really. Not yet. Just performing the outline of it, waiting for the next cue. "I never stopped loving you," she tried again, and it sounded like a last-ditch effort to summon magic from ashes. "I believe you," I said. "You just loved yourself a little more." That one landed. Her mouth twitched. Her eyes hardened for a half-second, anger pushing through the cracks of pity. It was always there, just behind the mask. The moment she didn't get what she wanted, love turned to resentment. But not this time. This time, she didn't have the ground to stand on. The stage was gone. The script was shredded. I reached for the door handle behind me. She stepped back, as if I'd struck her. "Good night," I said, and I closed the door. No slam. No drama. Just a click. She stood there a moment longer, I assume. I didn't look out the window. I didn't need to. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the house finally felt quiet. Not peaceful. Not healed. Just quiet. And I wasn't letting her back in. The county clerk's website doesn't play fanfare. There's no ominous music when the deed updates. No red text screaming, "You've lost everything." Just a new line on a dry municipal page. Owner name. Date filed. Parcel reassigned. But when I refreshed the page and saw my name listed, alone, under sole proprietor, I sat back and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The transfer had gone through. No challenges. No extensions. Just a quiet bureaucratic machine doing what it does best, processing the inevitable. By that afternoon, the paper trail became public. Real estate databases updated. Title agencies synced. And somewhere between lunch and happy hour, her father found out. He hadn't called me. Of course not. He still had too much pride, even now. But I heard through a friend in zoning. He tried to block a permit reassessment. Claimed a clerical error, said it was under review, and pushed for a delay. He'd even name-dropped a state senator he once played golf with. Didn't matter. The trust's legal team had already responded before he hit send. The reassignment was permanent, not in limbo. Not pending. Final. Non-contestable. He didn't take it well. Apparently, he tore through every contact he had. Real estate buddies, land use attorneys. Even tried a favor from someone at the recorder's office who owed him from a backdoor land swap 10 years ago. Each time, he hit the same wall. Airtight documentation. Consent forms. Timestamped filings. Digital trails that led straight back to his daughter's signature. And mine. The house, the family legacy, as he loved to call it, was now entirely in my name. And worse, it had been taken from them not through some dramatic act of betrayal, but through their own apathy, their signatures, their ignorance, their arrogance. The final blow came at dinner. A quiet Sunday night, apparently just the two of them. She wasn't eating, just pushing cold pasta around a plate. He'd been pacing for hours, laptop open on the kitchen counter, documents pulled up, still convinced he could reverse engineer the loss. That's when he asked, "What exactly did you say at that party?" She blinked. "What?" Verbatim, he said. "What were your words?" She hesitated. Probably thought it didn't matter. Still didn't grasp the gravity. "I said," she began, voice unsure. "I said, will you take over for this old man?" And then I laughed. That's all. It was a joke. She expected him to scoff. Maybe laugh along in hindsight. Maybe mutter about my ego and how I'd always been sensitive. Instead, his face drained. Completely. She said he actually sat down. "You made him invoke Clause 17, he hissed. She frowned. "What? You mocked your husband? At a family event? In front of witnesses? That clause was never supposed to activate. It was just a legal firewall, a technicality. But now it's real. You made it real. Do you even realize what you made him do?" That was the moment it hit her. Not when I walked out. Not when she got the reassessment notice. Not when she stood barefoot on the porch begging for a conversation. No, the moment her father looked her in the eyes. Not as his little girl, but as the one who'd cost him everything he thought he controlled. That's when it sank in. Because she hadn't just embarrassed me. She'd flipped the detonator on her own family's illusions. The legacy her father paraded around like a trophy? Gone. The equity she used to brag about in conversations with her brunch crew? Deleted. And the house. The symbol of status, of control, of permanence? It belonged to the man she publicly mocked. He didn't yell after that. Didn't speak, apparently. He just stood up from the table, went into his office, and shut the door. She stayed seated. Alone. Still holding her fork. Still not eating. What she didn't know, what neither of them had realized, was that I wasn't done yet. Because paper trails don't just end at deeds. They branch. They sprawl. And she had signed more than one thing in her life without reading it. This was just the beginning of her education. The backyard looked different now. Not because I changed anything. Same patio furniture, same string lights still sagging from one post like a loose thread, same stain on the flagstone from where someone knocked over sangria during the party. But it felt different. Like the ground remembered. It was quiet. Just me, the bottle of Booker's I'd been saving since last fall, and my laptop open on the table. The same table where she'd raised a plastic ring like it was a joke, and the same table where I now watched the final email alerts trickle in like little notes from a universe that had finally taken my side. Subject line, deed finalized, parcel 773, B, 48. Subject line, title transfer complete, county recorder confirmation. Subject line, mortgage resolved, zero balance acknowledgement. Each one hit my inbox with the soft ding of inevitability. I didn't toast. I didn't say anything. Just poured 2 fingers of bourbon into the glass, held it up to the light for a second, then took a slow sip. Let it burn all the way down. Across town, she was probably sitting on her father's living room couch, a spreadsheet of rental listings open, trying to figure out how long her savings could float a deposit. Maybe calling friends, asking for short-term options. Maybe even trying to loop Kyle into the mess, though I doubted he was picking up. That kind of second-hand embarrassment tends to sever even the strongest work husband fantasy. And her father? He'd gone ghost. The man who once held court at every dinner, every barbecue, every 4th of July, now couldn't look his own contacts in the eye. One favor too far. One assumption too many. At 6:43 p.m., I got a text from Ray. College buddy. He didn't even know the details. Just drove past her place on his way to pick up his kid from soccer. Just saw her dad screaming in her driveway. Looked like he was about to throw his phone at a bush. "What the hell did you do?" I stared at the message. Smirked. Typed back. "My birthday came with a gift this year." And that was all. No revenge montage. No public takedown. No triumphant monologue. Just a transfer of power, signed and sealed. and a woman slowly learning that not every man walks away bruised and begging. Some just walk away and take the foundation with them. The neighborhood was beginning to settle into evening. Sprinklers kicked on down the block. A dog barked somewhere. Wind moved the wind chimes we bought together on a trip to Asheville. I let them ring. Let the air move through the space like it needed to stretch its legs after holding its breath for too long. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from her. Just one word. Please. I didn't reply. I closed the laptop, drained the last sip of bourbon, and leaned back in the chair. The night she mocked me, she'd looked around for laughter. Now, there was only silence. And I didn't need applause. I had the deed.